Welcome to Module 3. And in this module, we're going to be talking about inclusive communication. And so we are going to explain inclusive communication. We're going to talk about the principles of inclusion. We're going to identify theories that help explain challenges and opportunities related to inclusive communication. And we're going to identify communication challenges to inclusive communication. So let's begin. So we know that inclusive communication is important because it is central to our ability to learn, to work, and to form and maintain relationships. And so we know in a society where we have various types of people, being inclusive is important. And we start with our own identity. What is our own identity? And then we take a look at others that are around us that might be different than us. And so we also understand that there is going to be diversity. And also, we need to understand that equity is important. So, in your text, you'll read about some of the examples of why equity is important. Now, we're going to talk about cultural identity. And so we understand that our identity is formed by our beliefs, such as our religious beliefs, our culture, such as the type of foods that we eat, and also where we live. For instance, we live in the United States of America. If we were living in France or the Czech Republic or in any other areas, we may eat differently, we may think differently, we may speak differently. And so in the United States of America, the American culture is the dominant culture. The non dominant culture, then, would be those individuals that are not necessarily a part of the American dominant culture. And you will read more about this in the text. So here are some of the theories of inclusive communication. And you'll notice that there's something called sit and cat. And sit is societal identity theory. And this explains how individuals form a sense of self. And so as you consider your own societal identity or social identity, you can have a sense of pride in your identity, in your culture, in your beliefs. Now, the CAT, which is the communication accommodation theory, states that people adjust their communication style to match the styles of others. And you can read more about CAT in the text here. So we have challenges to inclusive communication. Your text describes many times when you're a part of SIT, of the societal, of your own culture, that may be the dominant culture, then there are going to be challenges if you are dealing with, let's say, the non dominant culture. There's something called ethnocentricity. And this is where challenges occur during communication between different cultures. You might say tomato, I may say tomato. I was born in England, I say tomato. I came to America, I had to speak the way Americans speak. Now, we also know that we can stereotype sometimes, especially if we're a part of the dominant culture, but it goes the other way. Sometimes when we're a part of the out group or the culture that is not dominant, we stereotype the dominant culture. And sometimes these beliefs, as we described in the previous module, are not necessarily correct. We have our prejudices, and you can read about more about that in the text as you're reading about the cultural inclusion. Now, you can improve your inclusive communication. And so you begin by conducting a personal self assessment. Think about your attitudes, your identity, your beliefs about your culture, and as opposed to other cultures. You can practice supportive communication behaviors. And that means that you can have empathy for other cultures that may be marginalized. That means that they're not treated well. You can develop sensitivity toward other cultures. You can avoid stereotypes, avoid ethnocentricity. And you can read more about that in this chapter. So, in summary, inclusion is important because we are increasingly interacting with different folks. And if you want to get further in your work once you get out of college, it's going to be important that you learn how to interact with other people, other cultures, other ethnic individuals that are not of your same ethnicity. Inclusive communication seeks to reduce communication barriers, and diversity and equity help us build relationships with different people in fair ways. And a culture that is unique um, is a unique a culture is a unique combination of rituals, ways of thinking, and ways of behaving. We have the dominant culture, which would be, as we described in the United States, we have the dominant culture, which is the dominant society. In America, we have the non-dominant cultures, which would be those who are not a part of the dominant culture. And we have to strive to improve our own communication competence by conducting personal self-assessments, practicing supportive communication behaviors, developing sensitivity toward diverse communities, avoiding stereotypes, avoiding ethnocentricity, developing code sensitivity, and managing conflicting beliefs and practices, and practicing reflexivity. Now, that is the end of this mini lecture. I will see you in the next lecture.